boom, the next thing you know, you meet this one person and that spirals into this whole series of events that becomes this epic story you tell your kids about. Although a lot of the stories that I get involved in, I probably wouldn't tell my kids about, or who knows, maybe I would. They don't need to be sheltered. They need to learn the truth about their father's promiscuous behaviors. Okay, but when appropriate, you know, at a certain age, like I crack open the archive, the infields. Like, mommy, daddy, how did you meet? Well, let's go to the tape. Let's go.
When I drive Lyft, obviously it's a situation where you don't know who's coming in the car and stuff like that. So before I started the program and even like going into it, it was still kind of, I felt like entanglements, like before I would like have people come into the car, like sort of like anxiousness. But now it's at the point where the anxiousness is like really kind of on like subsided super, super low. And I'm able to, I don't know, really free flow more with people, connect with them more, like actually meeting people in the city, getting contacts, like being more plugged in and stuff like that.
You know,
well, the point is that's why you train this shit. Remember, there's a, like we said before, like we always say,
there's
a big difference between exercise and performance. You know, here in this sort of like sort of isolated environment, this judgment-free zone, whatever you want to call it, you know, we go through these things, we do these exercises, we work on these different areas in isolation. Again, call up Old Faithful here. You know, we separate these things out, we parse them out, we take a look at where the deficiencies are. We work those in isolation. We put them back together in a more completely realized whole, you know, so you have a whole instrument. It gives you a better understanding. However, remember, you're not supposed to be thinking about that in process. You're not supposed to be, you know, actually in interaction and like, okay, is my facial mode herp to derp to d? Like, is my intellect a bridge or a barrier? So it's kind of funny because I had a singing session the other day and a singing lesson yesterday. And, you know, I've been doing this for several years. And when I initially started going because I worked with Susan on the Resonator program. I don't know if you've seen that. That solely deals with vocal production, like tone production, having it be healthy. Here we get into more of tonality on this mentoring. We get into tonality and language musicality, how to manipulate that to create specific effects and create a good vibe, blah, blah, blah. But Resonator is largely concerned with actual healthy, attractive, powerful tone production. So I worked with her, and then, you know, she's a singing coach, with a classically trained singing coach with 40 years experience. I mean, literally, she doesn't even know what pop music is. I think she might know what the Beatles are, you know, but other than that, she knows like opera. That's pretty much it. So I said, you know what? Why don't I take a couple singing lessons with her? And I'm going to stop doing it when I stop getting epiphanies. Well, here I am like 3.5 years later, and I'm still going like several times a month. So the other one thing that we did the other day was, well, there's two main points here. One thing we did the other day, she said, Jeff, when you sing, I notice you have a tendency to kind of sway around and you kind of move around to the beat. And sometimes you kind of like, you do this, or you'll like kind of walk around. And she's like, do you do that on stage? And I'm like, yeah, actually, like I do kind of walk around and I kind of like go up and down and do these like crazy kind of gestures and things like that. And she said to me, she's like, you know what, just as a kind of exercise here, let's have you be like completely still. And I'm like, okay. And so I did it. And I felt like a very, very strong impetus to actually move. And she said, look, what I want you to realize is when you're doing these seemingly random movements, it's actually leaking energy out of the performance. Now, if these movements were precise, if they were well thought out, if they had direction about them, they might be contributing to the performance. But currently, as you're doing it, like when you sort of are wandering around stage in this random manner, think of it as it's leaking energy away from the vocal performance. So I was like, oh, very interesting. And so I did a couple more songs, and I resisted the impetus. And there was a very strong urge to move when I tried to do this, very strong. And I was like, stop, don't do it. And she's like, I could see you resisting that, but it seems, again, more grounded, more powerful. You're like, what's he going to do? And then at one point I did make a gesture, but it was a very thoughtful gesture, a well thought out gesture. She's like, and that had a lot of power. So this brings us back to what we talk about when, if you have to do something as a default necessity, it sucks. It's weak. For example, facial armoring, or kind of being in a very monotonous vocal tonality. If you can't do anything else, it's terrible. You're betraying helplessness. You're betraying powerlessness. But and in fact, even that could come from a place, you could portray being helpless from a place of power if it's a choice. But that's kind of neither here nor there. But so when we're talking about this, if I can't help myself but to make these random movements and go about the stage, it obviously sucks. It's just like this aimless nonsense that's leaking energy out of the performance. But if I'm still and grounded, and then I make a purposeful gesture, that becomes very powerful. That becomes very, very powerful. And I forget what the gesture was. It was like I was singing My Way by Frank Sinatra. I was like, the record shows I slapped the hose and did it my way. Yeah, I slapped the hose, yes. It's going to be like a community guideline strike where I'd ever, post this or some shit. But long story short, it's like it was very powerful because it was thoughtful and it was purposeful. So here's the thing. This is the interesting part. Heretofore, up to that point, we had largely simply worked on, okay, vocal tone. Are you hitting the notes right? Okay, let's work on the apparatus on how to hit the notes right, how to, hit them powerfully. Are we belting? Are we doing a semi-lean? Are we doing this, that, laryngeal position, all of these things. Now we're starting to bring in other elements of the performance, because the thing is, when you're interacting with somebody, it is a performance. There's definitely a sense of performance when you approach, you introduce yourself, and you meet someone for the first time. There's a sense of being on stage. There's a sense of like, okay, here I am. And they're sort of like, okay, what? All right, what do you got? So you need to take into consideration all of these elements. So now we're bringing in, how is the kinesthetic mode affecting the overall presentation and the overall instrument? So, and here's the interesting point. This is kind of why I thought of this. Again, remember, as you're going out and you're performing, if you will, in interactions, having learned all of this stuff in the mentoring, for example, where we exercise these various things, again, in isolation, we strengthen them and we identify the weaknesses, we strengthen them, we learn how to become aware of and release various tensions. You shouldn't be thinking of this stuff in actual performance. Like, again, when I go on stage next time, like I go out to the karaoke bar or what have you, the first couple times I'm up there, I might be consciously thinking, remain still, right? That lesson from Susan. However, over time, and this is one thing I've noticed, those intellectualized, those thoughts, they cease being verbalized in your mind anymore, and they simply present themselves as almost like energy pictures or thought forms. I don't know how to describe it exactly. So, for example, I often, another reason I've been practicing with Sinatra is because I am a high baritone, and the songs I like to sing are all like tenor songs. Right, because it's typically these like sort of cock rock ballads and things of that nature. REO Speedwagon, Air Supply, Journey. I'm all out of love. I'm so lost without you. I know you will. These higher tessitura, these higher range songs. And so, interestingly enough, because I've sang those so frequently, I often find that I'll have difficulty singing in a lower range. Like, so for example, Sinatra, it's like, and now the end is near. So it's like, it feels like because I'm not projecting, and there's not that need to like belt, it feels like it's not powerful. So I needed to learn. So I've been working with that. So one thing, and we're getting to a point here, one thing that Susan taught me was, okay, so you want to kind of change the laryngeal position. Like if you're singing lower, you want it to be the larynx, the voice box, you want it to be a bit lower in the throat. So how do you do that? What's a trick to do that? Is you say the word, okay, like, and now the end is near. So you say it like, and you whisper it, and now the end is near. And then you whisper it lower, and now the end is near, and now the end is near. And that takes the voice box lower. So now you can sing it like, and again, it takes it there. And I go, and now the end is near. And so I face the final curtain. And so it feels a lot more powerful. There's a lot more vibrato to it. And you don't need to project it for it to be powerful. So the thing is, getting back to, and this is the point here. I was singing that the other week, and I remembered, okay, do that little whisper thing, but it did not present itself in my mind as a voice in my head saying, okay, Jeff, do the little whisper thing to make your larynx go down. It was just like this sort of thought, again, image or energy form or something. It was just like that. And this is what we're talking about when you get to a place of unconscious competence. So as we talk about these very sort of elaborate, almost abstraction, well, a goal of this program is not to indulge in abstractions. And again, for those of you present here, you know, the exercises we do here are extremely concerned with pragmatic reality, right? They're not just these thought experiments like, okay, what are some physical exercises that we can do to increase the range of vocal tonality, the range of facial expressivity, to increase the amount of time that the mind spends in useful and supportive activity as opposed to being this judgmental hindrance, yada, 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 and so on and so forth. You know, opening access to intuition through various exercises. It's very practical, very pragmatic, but the intention is not for you to go out then subsequently into the real world and have these interactions and be thinking about this stuff. You drill it in exercise so you don't have to think about it in performance. Again, the classic analogy I always say, a football player, he might lift weights in the gym, he might run through tires on a field during practice. He's not going to do either of those things in the actual game, but both of those things will improve his ability to perform in that game. So remember that as you go out, this is why you're training this stuff. You're training this stuff so you can go out and it'll be at your fingertips, right? And remember, as we said before, individual choices gain power in direct proportion to the larger range of choice potential surrounding them. So if you develop this ability to be a lot more expressive in the face, the voice, the body, you understand how your kinesthetic, you know, your predilections or your tendencies, for me exactly, for example, to kind of wander around. I can sort of like, my mind in practice will almost be like a guard. And this is what we talk about when we talk about the mind spending more time in supportive activity, right? It's like, it's not like this bouncer, can this be allowed external expression? It's more like a guardrail. Like, okay, don't veer off into this, don't veer off into that. It's like this gentle guardrail that's funneling everything towards external expression, not acting as this sort of guardian. So that's how it feels, at least to me, when I'm actually out there performing, right? So again, remember, in exercise, you practice what you can't do. In performance, you allow what you can when necessary. And this is why we train this stuff, because as Matt said, opportunities present themselves at the strangest times, at the most random times. You know, you might be out on just like a random Sunday afternoon and in walks to the bodega, your dream, partner or something like this. And do you have the ability to actually go and introduce yourself to them in a way that's going to be easygoing, fun, lighthearted, compelling, interesting, and have it be fun for them and present a nice vibe. And then you also have this understanding of technique. Again, if you say you're trying to pursue that romantic encounter with them, you have an understanding of technique on how to move it forward in a smooth way that's not pushy, but at the same time does move it forward in a fairly methodical way. And boom, when you have those two things together, this becomes easy. It becomes a lighthearted adventure, as Matt said, as opposed to being this sort of like ball-racking referendum on your value as a human being, like putting myself through the war and the fire, these analogies. And yes, there is something to be said for stepping up and confronting your fears, because remember, all learning, all growth is movement into the unknown. And that can be frightening for a lot of people, especially dealing with the uncertainty of whether or not it's going to go well. Right. But then, of course, most people also have negativity bias from social, counter conditioning, I guess you might call it. They think it's going to be negative. Right. We think up these mental movies in our head about how terrible it's going to go and yada, yada, yada. And then the next thing you know, it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. So for me, for Matt, for, the people I work with, we've gone out and we've got enough reference experiences. We've given our brain the proof, not the promises. So now generally when we go up, there is always going to be that little instinctual, midbrain amygdala driven, like anxiety trigger around social interaction. But we've also cooled that off through, again, giving it enough reference experiences that, yeah, it typically does go well. And then beyond that, we also have a keen understanding of the value proposition that we're bringing to other people. And we're like, okay, some people are going to be into it, some people aren't. But I also have a sense of control over the situation because, again, I've learned this stuff. I've learned technique. I've learned how to create a good vibe. That means I have a reasonable, I've done everything I can do, right? So I'm not flailing, hoping it goes well, because that's what I see a lot of the time. People just flailing. Like, they go up, they open someone, they introduce themselves, and it starts going well. They're like, it's going well. I hope it somehow resolves itself to my satisfaction of its own accord from here. But I don't know what the hell to do next. It's like, well, that's why you learn a little bit of technique. Again, like I always say, if you want to have a boring conversation with your neighbor, bringing the trash in, that doesn't require technique. But again, if you want to sell and close sales, if you want to negotiate, if you want to, again, have advanced ability of conflict resolution, if you want to have, the ability to go up to someone and introduce themselves, a stranger, and get romantic with them in a short time and have that be well received. These are not the types of interactions that most people have on an everyday basis. Again, these require skill, they require technique, they require precision, they require control, they require an understanding of the demands that are going to be put upon your internal system as you try to communicate in order to get those results that you want to have. And again, what do we do about all this? Well, we want to look at how does that system function, get a model for that. We want to, and then develop some sort of exercise process so you can systematically work on that and you can continue to work on it for the rest of your life. And that's what we presented this mentoring, I believe, and also on the live in-field programs. Designed to, like, I think that they're kind of flip sides of the same coin. Like the mentoring here, we work on vibe and isolation, okay? Because that was the biggest, and I'm preaching to the choir here, but y'all know this. I created this because I got sick of seeing people come on the in-field programs and they knew technique like the back of their hand, but they could not effectively execute that technique because they simply could not make the people look at them long enough because their vibe was like either non-existent or off-putting or aggressive or aggro or something. And they had no awareness of this. First of all, they had no awareness of it. And second of all, when I told them, they had no idea of how to fix it. And quite frankly, neither did I. I said, be cool. You seem stifled, smile more. Now here we're working on that in very practical ways. We've broken it down to a science. We've broken it down to sort of the microscopic, granular detail of what goes into creating that vibe. That's what we do here. And then boom, we exercise that in isolation. Boom. Then you go out and then you learn the technique. And that's, I think, where, the infield training comes in. And honestly, I really believe that everyone who takes either one of these, the mentoring, they should take a boot camp at some point subsequently, and vice versa. Everyone who comes on boot camp, well, not everyone necessarily, but the people who I believe would benefit from it, like whose vibe isn't already, pretty free and pretty good. I highly recommend that they come on the mentoring as well. So, because they do go hand in hand, they are sort of flip sides of the same coin, if you will. So anyway, but long story short, because Matt was talking about that life adventure. And when you learn this stuff, like I said, it feels very free. It feels very light. It feels like you have power. This is where core confidence comes from, right? This is what we're talking about. When you have core confidence and not just this put on a happy face and fake it till you make it, or I can have confidence in certain situations where I have value or I have relevance or I have power in that situation, then you're constrained. You feel constrained. And that is the definition of scarcity. That is the definition of scarcity. And that's going to lead you down some very dark paths, potentially at least, where you're, again, for example, trying to hook up with someone at work and causing this big problem for yourself, or staying in a relationship that's not healthy for you. And it because, I won't be able to get someone else better in a reasonably short time frame. So when you don't have that and you kind of move to this abundance through, number one, understanding of technique, number two, understanding how to vibe, number three, gaining that core confidence where, again, you have that sense of control that comes from learning technique. And then number two, you have this sense of commitment. You understand the why, as Tony Robbins always used to say, of why you feel this is important. And again, I think everyone on this call understands very keenly why. You've obviously got some kind of leverage on yourself, or else you wouldn't be here. But like, again, why is this a must and not a should? Like, why must I do this? Why must I burn the boats? Why must I, do this come hell or high water, as the saying goes, as opposed to like, okay, yeah, one day I should, and whatever it takes for some people. For me, it was a series of bad breakups. For other people, in like for fitness, for example, it might could be when you hit a certain weight that the alarm bells go off. You know, you get on that scale and you see like that number that tells you, damn, this needs to stop today. You will do whatever's necessary at that point. So I think that, but again, what we really all want to be thinking about here is, again, that adventure that comes with it. Life isn't this, again, thing to be coped with, as Owen says. You're not coping, you're thriving, right? You go out, like a night out for me, I just love it because you don't know what's going to happen. You don't know the crazy story. Like some night you might go out, it just seems like this normal kind of run-of-the-mill evening. And then boom, the next thing you know, you meet this one person and that spirals into this whole series of events that becomes this epic story that you're going to tell yourself, you're going to reminisce upon, and you're going to tell others, maybe you tell your kids about. Although a lot of the stories that I get involved in, I probably wouldn't tell my kids about, or who knows, maybe I would. Fuck it. They don't need to be sheltered. They need to learn the truth about their father's promiscuous behaviors. Okay, but when appropriate, you know, at a certain age, like I crack open the archive, the infields. Like, mommy, daddy, how did you meet? Well, let's go to the tape. Let's go to the tape. But again, you know, and these are the memories that'll last a lifetime. These are the memories when you look back. And again, you've heard this in the marketing materials again and again and again. You want to live your life like a movie, a life like a movie. You think that's just some fucking pithy marketing phrase? Life like a movie. Have a life. This isn't a marketing phrase. This is our life is like my life, Matt's life. It's like a movie. Like literally, I wrote a book about this, and that was only like up until like 2008. The subsequent years would be probably an even crazier book, right? I don't even know if I'd want to write that, right? So, I mean, looking back, it's like on my deathbed, like, damn, son, you did some wild shit. That was crazy. You were like the protagonist in a movie, as opposed to, well, you know, I can predict the future because every day looks the same. I wake up and I have my toast and I get in the car. It's like, woke up, got out of bed, dragged a comb across my head. I went downstairs and had a coat. Looking up, I noticed I was late. Like, it's just the same nonsense over and over. Hello, Mr. Henderson. Oh, here's the reports, Mr. Henderson. Oh, getting my fucking metal vehicle to travel like in a metal coffin down the freeway with a bunch of other drones. But not saying that there's anything bad with having a job per se, but you know what I mean? It's just this sort of very repetitive thing. Whereas for me, again, you go out and I never know what's going to happen. I never know. Like every time I step out of the damn house, something crazy could happen, right? Why? Because I'm not this fearful individual that's like hiding in my shell. Although to be fair, the van is like a shell. In the van, I feel like I'm protected. I feel like a tortoise in its shell. I feel like I am a rock. I am an island. The van is impervious to nonsense of all kinds, and I can be free. I can be myself. But and that's why, you know, I felt like almost like a hermit crab who had lost its shell the past year. The van's back. The new van 2.0 is back, and the legacy continues. And let the adventures commence. This program is designed to give you a process to open and sustain charismatic expression with increasing consistency. Remove the obstacles, isolate the skills, exercise them separately, then put them together in a more completely realized whole. How to speak to all the issues surrounding this interrelationship between intuitive and intellectual resources is arguably the most fundamental challenge facing anyone who's attempting to improve their communication skills.
So if you're looking to develop general charisma that you can apply across all areas of life, definitely check out Jeff's Charisma Mastery.